You're listening to the Radius Church podcast, recorded live each Sunday in North Hollywood, California.
Happy Mother's Day. We're so glad you're joining us today. Hi, Mom. I love you so much. Every time we come across Mother's Day, it's a day to celebrate, but we also know that it's a day that doesn't necessarily feel like a celebration to everyone. There's people on the other side of the screen for whom Mother's Day might be something more like grief or sadness or frustration. And so we're glad that you're joining us too, and we know that there's something that God has for you to get out of today. But this particular Mother's Day is actually not ideal for anybody, even those of you who are moms, who love being moms. This is a bizarre Mother's Day. But what do I know? I am not an expert in this, so I brought an expert. I brought my favorite mom. This is my wife, Katie. Thanks for joining me today.
You're welcome.
This is the picture-perfect Mother's Day for you, right?
Absolutely. Everything I hoped and dreamed it would be.
We were joking that it would just be tragic, but probably the way it's going to go is that here we are sheltered in place for Mother's Day, and then like the day before Father's Day, they're going to discover a vaccine and everything's going to open up and we have barbecues and ticker tape parades, which would be awesome if the world opened up again, but also completely unfair. Today, I invited Katie to be with me because we're going to give you a hardcore parenting lesson.
That's right.
No. Not at all. We are still raising our kids, and we'll see how they turn out before we give you a parenting lesson. Instead, we thought we'd give you just a little bit of a slice of life in the Barkley home, where most nights my family gathers around me and looks at me lovingly while I preach to a camera, right? No, not that.
Not at all.
No, actually today we thought it'd be a great opportunity to get real. We love being real and honest in Radius. And for Mother's Day, I think it's as great of an opportunity as ever to just be real, to be honest about what's going on in our lives. And frankly, I don't know anybody who is better at being real than my wife, Katie, who is a mom for sure, but she is so much more than a mom. You had a life before you were a mom, right?
I did have a life before I was a mom. I moved out to California when I was 20 and was super excited about this life of adventure living on the West Coast. I moved from the Midwest, and I married a musician. He was a musician. So I thought, this is going to be this super fun, like adventurous, traveling all over the world up until 2 a.m. kind of life. And it kind of was.
Yeah.
Kind of was. It was fun. So, that was my life before kids.
And then a lot changed. Before you were a mom, how did you perceive moms?
I have a great mom, so that was a great example to start off. But I also grew up in the 80s, so it was a lot of like mom jeans and perms. That's moms to me when I was a kid. Before it was cool again, now it's cool. Everybody wears mom jeans and perms. It is. It's cool again.
Oh.
But I had kids pretty young, so I didn't have a lot of peers that had already gone ahead of me and kind of paved the way. So I didn't have a lot of ideas about what it was like to be a mom. I had one really good friend who had older kids, a little bit older, and she was just like this great example. So Abby was kind of the person that I looked to for everything to see like, okay, this is what it's like to have the really fun moments and the really mundane moments. And so I'm really grateful that I had the opportunity to like kind of live life with her and see what it was like before we stepped into it.
And did you want to be, like growing up, did you want to be a mom before you were a mom? Was that something you desired?
Yeah. I had a lot of little cousins, so I was used to having them around. Also because it was the 80s, I was babysitting at like 10 years old. Like all hours of the night, which I can't imagine our 11-year-old babysitting, but so I always loved kids, always wanted to be a mom.
But your life still changed radically. You were the coolest chick I'd ever met. You still are.
Thank you.
But a lot changed when you had kids, right?
Yeah. They changed. It changed a little bit. At first, it really didn't. We were kind of like, I was very determined to have my kids and still live the life I was already living. So Like Tessa's bedtime was 11 p.m. and she got up at 11 a.m. and it was awesome. And we took her to India when she was 6 months old. Because her dad was in a band, I took her to every all-ages club that I could. She had hearing protection on, and she got kicked out of her first club when she was 5 months old. So it was kind of like I was kind of proud of that. But then they got older, and she, had her own opinions, and so she wanted to watch Little Mermaid 100 times a week, and she started going to preschool, and that started much earlier than 11 a.m., so I had to adjust my schedule. And I'm not the most scheduled, organized person, so when we added a second child, it was like, oh, if I don't pay attention to this, somebody's not going to get fed, or somebody's not going to make it to school on time, or get picked up from school on time. So, yeah, I had to kind of change my my way of thinking.
But your personality
structured.
was still intact, and what I love about you was still intact. And yet I felt like there were moments where I had to take the back seat a little bit, my experience of it. And I actually ran across this poem as I was thinking about today, and you'd have to tell me if you can relate to this at all. Maybe you across the screen give a little thumbs up if this sounds like the experience you're having. There's a poem by a mom named Nicole Johnson. It all began to make sense. The blank stares, the lack of response, the way one of the kids will walk into the room while I am on the phone and ask to be taken to the store. And inside I'm thinking, can't you see me? I am on the phone. Obviously not. No one can see if I am on the phone or cooking or sweeping the floor or even standing on my head in the corner because no one can see me at all. I am invisible. Some days I'm only a pair of hands, nothing more. Can you fix this? Can you tie this? Can you open this? Some days I am not a pair of hands. I am not even a human being. I am a clock. What time is it? I am a satellite to guide to answer what number is the Disney Channel. I was certain that these were the hands that once held books and the eyes that studied history and the mind that graduated, but now they had all disappeared into the peanut butter, never to be seen again. She's going, she's going, she's gone. That sound familiar at all?
Yeah, a little bit. Even now as our girls are older, like we have, very talented daughters who are involved in a lot of activities that require a lot of their time, and they don't have driver's license. So because we want to encourage and, kind of foster those talents, I spend a lot of my time sitting in rehearsals and voice lessons and driving all across Los Angeles to auditions and sitting on set. And, while I love it, I love encouraging them. I do feel like there's a lot of times where when I look at it, it feels like I'm spending a lot of time helping other people achieve their dreams.
I'm not a mom, obviously, but I can relate to being invisible on some level, and I'm sure some of you can relate to being invisible, even if a mom is not part of your responsibilities or your life story. Often we disappear into our work or we disappear into the needs of other people, and we feel like we are not being seen because other people have things that we need to attend to or we have to solve or we feel responsible for. So if you're feeling invisible today, I hope in some small way you also feel you are seen, that we see you. Of course, when responsibilities hit our lives, and being a mom is an enormous responsibility, there's a part of us that starts to emerge that we kind of wished was a little bit less visible. I know what this is like, maybe you do too. It's like with every kid or every new responsibility, there's this part of us that comes out, maybe we never met this side of us before. There's a part, of course, that's more loving and more nurturing than we ever thought that we had in us, and that's amazing. But there's this other person that sort of shows up to the party. This other person that's kind of frazzled and short-tempered and impatient or insecure or entitled, this person that gets really angry at a moment's notice. And Robert Louis Stevenson opened his book Jekyll and Hyde, I'm sure you've heard that story before, with this quote: "I stood already committed to the profound duplicity of life, that humankind is not truly one, but two, and that these polar twins should be continuously struggling. One of these polar twins, who was the Mr. Hyde character, bore the stamp of the lower elements in my soul, the part that I wish people wouldn't see ever, and certainly not as often as sometimes people see it. That might feel really acute or be exposing itself even more frequently during this pandemic, where for some of us it feels like there is no escape at all. There's no place to sort of get this out of our system, and we are taking it out more often on people that we care about. It might be for you something other than motherhood that's having this person emerge. It could be an illness that you're struggling through, or a job, or a relationship that's on the rocks. It might be those added responsibilities that you feel now towards your neighbors or towards your family. Or maybe just the fact that you would just love to take care of yourself in a way that you used to, but you can't access that right now. And this other person is starting to emerge, and you don't like everything that you're seeing. You're not the only one who has gone through this. Moms, you're not the only people who have gone through this. I want to go back to a guy who is processing through this. It's a man named Paul, who we've quoted a lot. He started a bunch of churches 2,000 years ago, and a lot of his writing is contained in what we call the scriptures. And you'd think, if we're going to put it in the scriptures, this is a guy who's got it all together. He always makes the right choice, always treats people awesome. But he writes something about this duplicity, this Mr. Hyde and this Dr. Jekyll polarity long before modern psychology and before Robert Louis Stevenson and before Nicole Johnson's poem. He writes in this letter to a church in Rome, chapter 7, verse 15, I don't really understand myself, for I want to do what is right, but I don't do it. Instead, I do what I hate. But if I know that what I'm doing is wrong, that shows that I agree that the law is good. In other words, there is a right and there is a wrong. I agree. He goes on to say, so I'm not the one doing wrong. There's a part of me that knows this isn't the best. It is sin living in me that does it. There's almost this other part of me, this other person that I don't like. And I know that nothing good lives in me, excuse me, that is, in my sinful nature, in that version of myself. I don't like Mr. Hyde. I want to do what is right, but I can't. I want to do what is good, but I don't. I don't want to do what is wrong, but I do it anyway. But if I do what I don't want to do, I am not really the one doing it. It is the sin living in me that does it. And if it sounds like Paul is talking in circles and wrestling with himself, I think he's getting his point across. This is what it feels like inside my head sometimes. It feels like this inside my soul sometimes, right? It probably feels this way for you too. There are times with my kids, with my team, with my wife, where I know what the perfect response would be. I know how I'm supposed to show up, the best version of myself, but instead this sort of creature shows up. This creature emerges in the room and yells, or gets sarcastic, or ignores and gets passive aggressive. Hyde takes over. This version of me, maybe this version of you that never makes it to the highlight reel of Instagram. It's this version of myself that my friends, our friends, and our small group doesn't get to see, because when people are around, we're a little bit more calculated and guarded. I can speak just as a dad, as a preacher, as a pastor, as a leader for just a second, as a husband. I can speak from that perspective as a parent, that often there's this other part of me that comes out that feels like I don't want to be selfish, but I'm acting selfish. I don't want to be selfish to the people that I love more than I even love myself, but yet it gets out of control. It gets out of hand. I almost cannot contain it. So here I have these people now in front of me as a parent. I have these kids, and even though I maybe was selfish before, I didn't realize how selfish I could become, and I hate it. I hate seeing that in myself.
Yeah. I think for me, the Mr. Hyde part of me, that monster inside, I think will often manifest as pride. I really get a certain level of satisfaction from watching our girls succeed. And it's not always that like proud parent, oh, I'm so proud of you. I mean, I have that too, of course, but there is the moment where it kind of switches and the feeling turns into, oh, this makes me feel really good. Like there's some sort of extension of me. And, there's times where in that moment when it takes over, I will notice that I maybe push them to do something, or I am a little overly critical of something that they've done because I think that, like, I want to hear that praise. I want to hear, even if the praise is for them, there's a pride in it that, like, them succeeding somehow says, oh, you're doing a good job as a mom, and then I take it out on them. So.
Yeah, and you're not alone in that. And even though there's parents that have different struggles, you know, sometimes my insecurities, I sort of take that out on my kids, or I need my kids to fill in that gap. But there are parents who have a deep, deep well of patience. Maybe impatience is not your challenge, even though it is for some. Some of you're actually meant to manage chaos and create structure. So it actually fills you up to have kids. When kids introduce chaos, that's just part of their job. Mm-hmm. There are ways in which parents are hand in glove. You are the perfect solution for the challenges that your kids have. It's easy to look at some parents and think, man, that mom, that dad, they are meant to be those kids' parents. And then you reflect on yourself. And I know for Katie and me, sometimes we'll think, we're not qualified to raise and nurture, protect, guide these precious young souls. I don't like what I see when I sometimes see myself emerging in the pressures of parenthood. But one of the gifts in this that I want to expose us to is that God is trying to show us something in those moments. When Mr. Hyde comes out, God is actually trying to introduce you to yourself. These added pressures of life, especially of parenthood, is an opportunity, maybe in a very unique way, for God to introduce you to yourself. I'd like to think that we're good people.
Yes.
Yeah, because we know bad people, right?
Right.
We read the news about bad people. I have strong opinions about bad people. We're not bad people. We're good people, right?
Yeah, I mean, yes. We are good people. I saw something when I was a young mom that, I mean, I'm still a young mom.
Yeah, you are.
That made me laugh, and I think about it often, is that my kids are making it really difficult to be the kind of mom that I always thought I was going to be. It's not my fault. It's their fault.
Right, exactly. No, because the person that we all want to be doesn't take out our garbage on those who are most vulnerable in our lives. We don't do our worst to those who are most vulnerable, who depend on us the most. But I do that. I take out my insecurity, I take out my anger on my kids, I take it out on my wife all the time, and when my kids and my wife aren't around, that's why we have a dog.
Yeah. You're very nice to our dog, though. You love him.
That's true, I do love our dog.
I think for us, like, for me, the quarantine is definitely bringing that out, because we are spending a lot of time together. A lot of time together. And I think for the most part, we're doing pretty well. I enjoy my family. I like my people. But I do notice that I'm an extrovert, and I'm a 7 on the Enneagram, and I want this to be done. And so when I'm frustrated or I'm anxious about, like, how long it's going to go on, or when I'm going to get my house back to normal, or I worry about, are we making the most of this time?
Yeah.
That's when I lash out at my kids or at you. And it's things like, why doesn't Tessa want to go for a walk with us? And I'm super irritated that Marlo has this giant cardboard fort in the living room that I let her build. And they don't want to go to do family game night, and then I'm just irritated and I want time to myself. And so I say, you need to leave me alone. I need some time to myself. And then I come out of that time to myself and I'm super bugged by the way that they chose to spend their time. So it's not my proudest moments, but that's when I'm stressed and I'm anxious. I'm real annoyed.
Yeah, those moments are awful. Yeah. They're like these mirrors. And the person looking back at us is not the person we envisioned being. We are not as much of a winner at this than we thought we were. But those mirrors can be gifts to us if that's how we receive it, because it helps us see how we're really doing. It helps us see who we really are. It helps us see that there is more bearing down on us than we have strength to accomplish. There's way too much going on for our strength or our wisdom. We need so much more than we've got to make it through what we're facing.
Yeah, there's that meme that's going around where it's like, if you're struggling because, you're struggling to balance work and parenting and all of a sudden being a homeschooler and keeping the house in order, it's not because you're failing, it's because this is really hard.
Yeah. So for everyone on the other side of the screen, specifically for the moms today, as God is introducing us to ourselves, one of the gifts that we can be reminded of is we desperately need a God who is there for us in this. We need God. It wouldn't be much of a gift for God to show you who you are, to show that Mr. Hyde side of who you are, just to shame you or to tell you how awful you are. That would not be grace. So in those times, like for me, when I hear my kids saying something I don't want them to say, but then I remember I'm the one who said that to them first, God is not exposing that part of myself so that I can fix myself or so that I can feel condemned. He's trying to draw me to strength greater than what I have. He's trying to draw me to himself. God, we need to work on my anger. God, I need you to work on my fear. God, I need you to help me be less critical of myself and my family. I need you to help me be less impatient or success-driven and controlling. God, I want to look more like Jesus, and I need to stop thinking I can do that without Jesus. I need you. He doesn't want you to wake up tomorrow morning, moms, dads, everybody on the other side of this screen. He doesn't want you waking up tomorrow morning saying like, all right, today, no more Mr. Hyde. I'm just going to keep him. I'm going to keep her under wraps. I'm going to be better. I'm going to be kinder. I'm going to be stronger. I'm going to be wiser. You don't need more resolve. You probably have a lot of that. What you need every minute of every single day is strength that you don't have by yourself. You need God. And you know what? As God is introducing you to yourself, and the Mr. Hyde side of yourself also, something else happens that's pretty incredible. God actually helps you get to know him more.
When Marla was little, she was a difficult baby.
Yeah.
Difficult.
Spirited.
Yeah. She hasn't grown out of that, which we love about her.
Yeah.
But she was, it was rough. She only let me hold her. She cried a lot. And I didn't really know what to do because Tessa was such an easy baby. So I thought like, cool, I know babies. I can handle this. And then she kind of threw me for a loop. And I remember being back in Michigan and visiting my family, and we were up at my aunt and uncle's cottage, and I was just kind of exhausted, and she was just crying, and my Aunt Michelle said, "Here, let me hold her," and I was like, "Okay, good luck." And she held her, and she just kind of, as an aside, just looked at her and said, "Yeah, it's really hard for you to be a baby, isn't it?" And it was like this one little moment, and I don't think Shell knew that she was, giving me this wisdom. I think she was just making a statement, and it changed. It changed everything. It changed the way I looked at her. It gave me like a perspective of compassion that, this is somebody who I get to take care of, and I have the privilege of caring for her through what's really difficult, like a time that she, even as a baby, is really struggling. And I carried that through. I still kind of go back to that at times, in my better moments when one of the kids is going through a preteen or a teenage angsty, outburst or whatever. When I can go back and look at that God has given me a compassion for them that, oh, this is hard. This is a difficult stage in life, and it's okay for you to be sad and to be mad, and it doesn't mean that I'm a bad mom.
Right.
It means this is when I get to lean in and be more understanding and more compassionate of what you're going through.
Right, because as God's introducing you to yourself, Mr. Hyde is not the whole story. That's not all of who you are. There's this part of you that's a lot more like the doctor. And that part of us, that Dr. Jekyll part of us that is compassionate, for instance, about how other people are feeling or our baby was feeling in that time, that's actually a glimpse of what God is really like. Like, let's not forget the doctor. Stevenson characterizes him in the book as a great physician who helped a lot of people. He was well respected. He was a man of integrity. He was trustworthy. People hated leaving his dinner parties because he was so incredible to be around. People just wanted to be close to him. Now listen, I know that we have the privilege of speaking to people who believe all kinds of things every single week, so I'm not sure if you believe in God or not, but for us, for our part, we actually believe that you have been handcrafted in the image of God. And what that means is, it makes sense that there's a part of all of us that wants to be compassionate. There's a part of all of us that wants to create beauty. There's a part that wants to create peace. There's a part that wants to be sacrificially loving. And when we act in those ways, we're actually, whether we know it or not, looking a whole lot like our Creator, because we're created in His image.
One of the most repeated metaphors for God in Scripture is one of a parent. I know we've heard a lot the God the Father, but in Isaiah 66:13 it says, "As a mother comforts her child, so I will comfort you." And then in my personal favorite, Hosea 13:8, "Like a bear robbed of her cubs, I will attack them and rip them open."
Yeah, I know a mom like that.
I like that one.
That's actually part of the character of God in you. So God wants to introduce you to yourself so that you start to understand yourself and you grow past some of that Mr. Hyde stuff that all of us have. But He also wants to introduce you to yourself in a way that reveals what He's really like and draws you into Himself. And that's one of the greatest gifts in all of this, the greatest gifts in the pressures of mothering and just in the pressures of life. God wants to help us get to know ourselves and, more importantly, to get to know Him better. And all of us are on this journey of relearning or unlearning and trying to establish, what is God really like? Who is this God that I get to be with? But I notice in my life that when I need God most, I'm often looking to Him least. I fold back in on myself and I try to figure this out on my own. And you know, when I was younger, it was easy to connect with God, at least I thought it was, to reconnect with Him. When I was younger in my faith and my relationship with Jesus, I could connect with God through youth group and through camp and through reading my Bible and through singing. It was almost effortless. And then life got harder.
Yeah, like we got married. Right? I mean,
Yeah.
well, honestly, because we both kind of had similar growing up and experiences with church and camp and God. And then, so the idea that, we'll get married and then we'll bring this in and this will be super easy. Yeah. And it wasn't. And so we had to figure out, how do we live together and how do we feed ourselves when we had zero money. And then we started a church. And so then, church became a job and God became this person you worked for, sort of. And then we had kids, and then, people and life experiences disappointed us and let us down. And I think that I really struggled with figuring out, do I do this because do I take my kids to church because I'm supposed to and because I'm a pastor's wife and people will notice if I'm not there? It was hard to kind of go back to the feeling of I'm doing this for me. It really became there's moments where it feels even my relationship with God is for other people. So
there's a way in which you almost become, or you can feel like you're becoming even more invisible as you're trying to connect with a God who sees you. Mm-hmm. I love that God is so motivated to reach us and to connect with us that He won't stop approaching us from all kinds of different angles. So even if some of the ways you're being told to connect with God feel a little loaded and complicated right now, if right now Mr. Hyde is showing up and you just kind of feel ashamed to open yourself up to a God who loves you, I just want you to know, first of all, we understand. And then I want you to know, secondly, is that God sees the real you, and that's who He loves. He sees the real you, and that's who He loves. He wants to connect with you. Yeah, we believe that He speaks uniquely through Scripture. we believe that he wants to connect with you intimately through prayer, but there are times when maybe you can barely read a sentence or maybe even retain a sentence because you're reading something and then the kid rushes in, wondering if you can take him to the store, or just the complications of life start to create so much noise in your head. So let nature tell you what God is like. And let your kids remind you at times how creative and how fun God is and how much he loves you and wants to cling to you. God wants to reach you where you're at right now today.
I think for me, one of the best pictures in my life of the character of God, and I'm not just saying this because it's Mother's Day, is my mom. And I don't think I probably didn't notice that or appreciate it when I was younger, but then I became a mom. And she's just a great example of how to be creative and how to love really, really well. She, in her church, is right across the street from a high school, sort of an under-resourced high school. And she spends a lot of her time caring for not just the students, but the faculty. And she's creating programs and mentorships and after-school tutoring. And, she makes chocolate chip cookies for the football team, just super cool stuff. And when I look at that, I probably wouldn't have appreciated it as much when I was little, but I'm like, that's Jesus.
Yeah.
And
your mom is somebody I look up to a lot. Mom, I love you, and I see the character of God in you. I see the character of God in you. I look up to you so much. Let me just give you one final encouragement. If today, right now, maybe moms that are watching us, joining us today, or anybody in frankly, any life situation, you just really feel like you can't connect with God, that you are wrestling with the old ways that you used to be seen and connect with him, or maybe those are just kind of hard to maintain. Maybe you just thought you were going to be in church today for Mother's Day, and that's even been taken from you, or at least adapted, changed on you here. Be encouraged that God is so motivated to reach you today, he's going to color outside the lines. He is going to do something amazing to tell you how much he loves you, how far he's going to go to reach you. Even if all that is visible right now in the pressures of life is the Mr. Hyde part of us, God still loves you and wants to reach you today. He wants to introduce you more and more to yourself, but really ultimately that is so that you can realize deeply how much you need him, and then find ultimately how much you have him. He is a God who loves you and will not forsake you, not forget about you, and nothing can separate you from his love. We all have a part of ourselves. We have a part of ourselves that we love, and we have a part of ourselves that we wish was less visible, for sure. And God is using this crisis. He might even be using parenting to help you get real about that war within your soul. He's using loss. He's using change. He's using something in your life to introduce you to yourself. We haven't got all this figured out. We really don't. After we take these microphones off, we're going to go back home and we're going to wash our hands. But we're also going to struggle to know how to care for our daughters' pressures that they're feeling in life, and struggle to know how to answer all of their questions and give them energy when we're running on empty. And as we try our best to do that, we really do hope that they see more of God's character than they see monster. But there's grace, even if today a little bit of Mr. Hyde shows up in our home. We're getting to know more of what we're like and how we can grow and how desperately we need a God who is there for us and loves us most. Thanks for being with me today.
You're welcome.
Is there any final encouragement you want to give to any moms who are joining us today?
Yes, I do, Joseph. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, just not prepared at all, off the cuff?
Just right off the top of my head. Yes, it is my piece of encouragement to you would be to have grace. Have grace for yourself. Have grace for your kids who are also missing out on a lot. Have grace for the moms that you see on social media that cannot wait to be done with all this and get a break from their kids. Have grace for the moms that have turned their house into a living Pinterest board and you're a little bit jealous and a little bit annoyed. Have grace for the mom that might have let her 11-year-old binge watch The Office and her 14-year-old binge watch The Walking Dead.
Who would dare?
I don't know. I don't know. Have grace for the mom who decided to introduce her children to Alfred Hitchcock movies and maybe pushed it a little too far with the birds and scared her youngest child. Have grace. Have grace for all the moms. We're really doing the best that we can. You're doing the best that you can, and it's okay. So, happy Mother's Day.
Happy Mother's Day.
Bye.
We love you.
Thank you for listening. For more information, follow us on social media at Radius Church LA and visit us on the web at radius.la.